please welcome Nishchal Khorana, the Vice President and Global Program Leader at Frost and Sullivan. Please welcome Nishchal. Zordar taliyan, please. Nishchal, hi, and a very, very warm welcome to you. We are happy to be inviting our session discussants. Please welcome our acclaimed ones. Chirag Thakkar, the Vice President of Technology at 361. Please welcome Chirag with a round of applause. We all learned the good benefits of clapping. Be at it. Please welcome Rishu Sharma, the Director and Digital Evangelist at Birlasoft. And ladies and gentlemen, the next speaker, panelist that we're going to invite is, of course, as I would always say, as you can see, please align yourself with the beautiful and amazing pictures that you see on the screen, so we'll be seated accordingly. Of course, he takes the stage, but somebody who's a promising leader, but most importantly, an amazing human, Vinod, Sivarama, Krishnan, the Chief Digital and Information Officer at Essar Group. With so much of power, please, a power-packed applause once again, everybody, for this panel. And Nishchal, I would take no time away from you. Please get started.
Thank you. Okay, great. So a warm welcome to all the panelists and all the audience here. So it's been interesting because I think the last few discussions that I was listening to, right, it's established that cloud is not a technology play only, it's of strategic importance today. It's got a greater role to play in terms of innovation, it's a CXO discussion, and so on and so forth. What I would like to do in this particular discussion is go a little deeper into the FinOps side, right? So I think we've got a great mix of experience here. But let me start with the big picture, right? And maybe Chirag, I can go with you first in that order. Can you give a perspective on how do you see over the years cloud has evolved in terms of the services that you're adopting, in terms of the overall adoption and scale? Because that really lays the foundation of our discussion going forward.
Yeah, great question. Thank you so much. You have seen across the industry also, like the cloud has been adopted at a very high scale. When it was introduced, people started seeing the benefits. Most common benefits would be scalability, easy to spin up resources, right? Easy to just go ahead. When you talk about on-premise, right, you have to raise a request for the server, get the approval, release the PO, there'll be expected delivery time. All those things just went off with introduction of cloud, right? So it has been a really quick adoption of cloud. In the industry which I work, I have seen a lot people moving on to cloud because it eases out your operations. You don't need to have specialized teams to set up the server, do the connections, set up, upgrade the firmware, so on. So all those things are just gone. So over the past, if you say me in short, yeah, we have seen a very, very quick and rapid adoption of cloud.
So quick and rapid adoption. Rishu, what's your experience? How do you see this changing?
Yeah, thanks, Nishchal. So I think we, like you said, we heard the same thing, a couple of things in the last couple of panels. Aside of cloud helping organizations in efficiencies and optimization, it's about driving the true business value and accelerated innovation. And having said that, I do see pockets of, areas where the shifts or the trends are moving. For instance, hybrid and multi-cloud, for giving ability to the organizations to choose the environment basis their workload requirement is a major, sort of trend that we're seeing out in the market. The interjection of AI and ML to be able to help organizations to make enhanced decision making, that's another area. Proliferation of the SaaS ecosystem, which is, pushing the future of work, and that was even more pertinent in the last couple of years, as we all know. And we've seen that come as a big picture in the overall cloud landscape. And the last one for me would be the edge computing, which we discussed in the last panel as well. The ability of the organizations to have the data processing closer to the data source, to be able to make faster real-time decisions is another area that I see, gaining momentum. So that'll be my bit.
Right, Vinod, same question to you as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to find something to say after these two now. But I think if I were to extract from that the key points, I think the two things that really accelerated this is the increased use of the SaaS ecosystem. So when a part of your application landscape moves there, the reluctance, if you will, to move started melting away because it started making more sense to put your data where your applications were. And I recall when we used to worry about the fact that our data wasn't with us, and then suddenly you wake up one day and find that, about 3/4 of your data is not with you anyway. So, how bad can it get? And I think with the steady removal of those inhibitions in usage, uh, this is obviously for all the qualitative benefits that we've talked about, which is like speed of deployment or speed to innovation. It's just natural that your environment would overflow into the cloud.
So it's clear, right? Speed of deployment, innovation, scalability, not only, as Rishu said, not only in the central environment, but also on the edge and so on and so forth, right? With that background, Vinod, maybe let you go first this time, is how do you see the importance of FinOps or cost as a discussion point? Uh, does the benefits clearly outweigh the cost, or is that a very severe or deeply discussed boardroom discussion today?
Oh, it certainly is. I think some of those bills and the general sticker shock of seeing repeated cloud bills over a period of time will do that to you. Look, I think the initial pricing constructs were very clear. I mean, you had this whole basic case of variability of demand, spikes. I will add compute for the purpose of dealing with emergencies, for the purpose of scaling. Now, over time, what happens is that you tend to fill up that slack. And now what you're evaluating is a steady state full on-prem environment versus a steady state cloud environment. And not all companies are asset shy. The CapEx versus OpEx argument works to a point, and then it starts working against you. So I think cost has always been a strategic driver, and at some point in your cloud journey, you start looking at this and saying, well, do I need to repatriate loads, which is what we are hearing of, and we're seeing a little bit of that. Because, hey, I'm utilizing this fully, and now I don't have the benefits of depreciating these systems, and now I don't have the associated financial benefits of, or the security benefits of having that particular customer-related data within my data center, and so on and so forth. So I would say really that at the point at which we went into this, cost was seen as a very narrow trade-off between CapEx and OpEx. And now it's much more to say, well, this is one deployment option. What is the cost of your other deployment options? And how does that look? And to the point that I think Rishu made, what architecture do you want? Hybrid, multi-cloud, where do you want this? Where do you want your data? Where do you want your applications? I think these are becoming very big considerations because of cost.
Interesting, right? So we're saying it's not only about from a capex to opex model shift, but it also encompasses some non-tangible costs, right, that probably were not encompassed earlier. It's also about the total cost of innovation, ownership over a longer period of time. Rishu, how does your industry necessarily, right, talk about cost, or how do you think it looks at it?
No, I absolutely agree to what was spoken. See, why cost management or cost discussion is pivotal. Predominantly, like you mentioned, even if there's a hybrid environment, there can be unintentional waste by the organization which needs to be accounted for. We're seeing pay-as-you-go service models, but it is important to have a proactive monitoring to be able to see, how my overall cost landscape is looking like. We're also seeing cloud being more and more leveraged for not only collaboration and storage, but also for newer workloads like AI and ML. And all of this is pushing and impacting the cost sprawl, which is where the discussion is important. Now, having said that, some of the areas that I think become important is, one, looking at how do we get this cloud cost or maybe cost conscious awareness within the organization, for the lack of a better word. How do we get the employees ready? How do we make them aware in terms of why this is an important area? And which is where I feel that it is important to have a shared accountability which resides between IT, between business team and the product owners, so that you have a clear focus in terms of accountability and how the costs are being spiking, and how do you manage all of that. So that'll be my 2 cents.
You've actually laid the ground for 2 questions for Chirag now coming up, right? So one, Chirag, of course, your perspective on cost and how is it looked at, how do you look at the cost? But second point, Rishu touched on, right, is the shared responsibility. So who do you think is accountable or responsible in general for cost, given the importance that it has gained now in a cloud deployment environment?
If I see this, it would be a cross-functional across the organization. I would see the major group that will be responsible for the cloud cost would be definitely a group of people. That will be one would be the cloud architect, because that person knows which services where to spin up and what is the best optimized way to spin it up. So the cloud architect is a must in that group. One from finance, definitely someone from finance, because there has to be budget tracking, how much you have spent, how much you have left with, right? So that person, and of course the business. So the business decides what it needs. And there should definitely be a leadership group. There should be definitely the CIO and the CTOs will see the innovation, will see the availability and all those things, but the CFOs will keep the budget tight. So it's basically three pillars you would use to create one FinOps team that will make sure your cloud costs are in control, in budget, and you're getting the best out of it.
So are you suggesting it's a group of, is separately formed group of people who own the cost of cloud, or is it a forum, or how is that kind of structure that you believe?
Yeah, for any deployments, like for any application that you want to take to cloud, definitely this group has to be the core committee in the discussion when it comes to FinOps, the cost and the operations. Yeah. So for anything that you take, yes, this group has to be involved.
So Vinod, I know we've spoken before on this, and I know you have slightly different views, but
Oh,
would love to hear this, right?
I would say diametrically opposite is kind of where I'm coming from, but frankly, I think the challenge really with a committee approach on these is eventually what is the responsibility. When you look at this as being a component of IT cost, because eventually that is what it is, then you have to rely on the same mechanisms that you used to rely on for other modes of IT cost. At least it's a view. Because the question that I always ask, and we had this discussion in every management committee I've been a part of in the last 10 years, we've had this discussion where we said, well, who understands this? An owner of a workload understands what that workload is and what value it brings to him or her. So, my head of operations understands what value my IoT workloads represent to him or her, and he or she is batting for that cost component. Now, the idea that I need somebody from finance to help me understand the billing from a cloud provider used to be true, certainly in the first generation of cloud billing, where I have a feeling they were making it up as they went along. So I think, but now if you look at the level of maturity of understanding the workloads and the costs associated with them, it's pretty much like any other service bill. And, my own team's ability to look at that and understand the correspondence between what it is that we're doing and how much it costs. The overall question of what value is that bringing belongs to the sponsors of those projects, but I'm much more comfortable going back to my management committee or my CFO as part of my budget discussion and saying, look, this is what it is. This is what this number is doing for us, and these are the stakeholders, and these are the numbers. And by the way, it helps that my CFO is about 40% of that cost bucket is indirectly or directly benefiting finance, because most of the jobs that we run, most of the workloads that we run, the month closing peaks where cloud is a huge component of those loads, makes so much sense for us to do the work. Now you're right, we may want to bring in expertise, but when you look at who owns that thing, I just look at it as an extension of my IT cost budget. It's a line, and slowly it is becoming a bigger line every succeeding quarter. So that is just my point of view. But I tend to see that when you diffuse the responsibility, you also diffuse the ability to do anything about it.
Fair enough. So that's been the classical discussion between responsibility and accountability, right? But again, I think it's also dependent on every organization, culture, and the evolution, right? So I think there's probably no right or wrong, but I think great points there, Vinod. Thank you. Rishu, going forward, right now, clearly what I can hear is while there's importance of cost and it's of high importance, I think the biggest piece there will be to measure it correctly, right? And I think that's where FinOps really plays a role. What is your view on FinOps and the tools to measure? Is it like a third-party tool? Is it cloud governance itself? Where does FinOps as a tool and mechanism really fit into the scheme of things?
See, as a tool, my view is that, of course, third-party tools are really important. Let's understand why they're important. We're seeing an interjection of technologies like AI, ML, right? More and more enterprises need predictive analytics when it comes to cost, to be able to at least get a view in terms of my accounted costs that are out there, right? These third-party tools provide you vendor-agnostic views. For instance, if I am on a hybrid environment, these tools would be able to help me, get a view or sort of have some sort of FinOps standardized across these environments. That is important. Other than that, when you look at, and we did, talk about the collaboration bit, my view is in most organizations, or at least to the ones that I'm aware of, this collaboration or this ownership is split between IT, business, DevOps, finance. And when you have these multiple personas out there, these third-party tools can also help you get your dashboard specific to that persona in terms of usage. So for instance, a dashboard to a finance team would be but would be different than what an IT team would look at, right? So that is where it is important. Other than that, I also feel, having these third-party tool can help in, governance aspect in terms of scaling the governance when it's associated with FinOps. So more and more, my view is, of course, these third-party tools are important because they give you, standardized, seamless view across your environments.
Right. Chirag, do you share these views or do you believe it's something different from?
Yeah, definitely. What was being said is definitely right. These third-party tools are evolving at a great pace. They are integrating ML and AI into their ecosystem altogether, which is great. One of the beautiful things I like is the NLP, the natural language processing. You can ask questions in natural language, right? You can just go and ask, why is my cost high on this date? And who was responsible for it. It can give you a brief answer why it was high, who spin it up, when it was spun up, and all those things. It can just go back, get all the information, give it to you. So along with the dashboards, this is the one piece that I really like about ML and AI integrating in this FinOps tool, third-party FinOps tools. The CSPs are also coming up with their tools, their reports, and it is also growing at a great pace. So along with third-party, the native tools are also evaluating. So it's definitely third-party tools are doing better right now, I would say, in my opinion. But the CSPs are also coming at a great pace on that side.
Interesting, right? So Vinod, and this is for you because I hear that you need third-party tools for personas, for standardizing across multiple cloud platforms, because of the advancements they're making in AI and perspective. But at the same time, I've also heard views that these can be probably very expensive and prohibitive to some organizations, right? How do you look at this, Vinod?
I mean, one part obviously is, you're absolutely right that you need a view that is kind of, across these. For instance, to my own previous point, when I'm looking at workload-based cost, I have to look at it through the journey of that workload, which may be across multiple clouds, and also a healthy part of my own infrastructure somewhere. The challenge is really that is, and if I hear a single pane of glass once more, I will break some glass somewhere, because most of these guys will talk to you about looking at that information in one place, and that is a convenience. But I'm always challenged with the idea of one layer additional to manage and understand and work with, and we can't really understand very simply how that works, especially when you throw AI into that and you're starting to get recommendations out of it which says, look at this workload. You may not be able to understand, the tool may not be able to understand in the context of your situation what is driving that. Is that necessary or not is still a decision. So you need a lot of human in the loop on that particular AI loop is what I think. But, and especially when you're paying a hefty overhead for this tool, you're just adding to what you have to justify by way of cost savings or whatever, because you introduced a new technology element into the stack. And you are now potentially making decisions on that basis. It's always something, I've always challenged my team to say, if you can't show it to me on a sheet of paper fairly simply, then we're doing something that we don't quite understand here. And my worry is, while you guys are absolutely right, my worry is that by abstracting it further, you're one level further away from the understanding of what the essentials are. So again, great idea. Can we get to some point of universal CSP, and CSP is a great direction in this because they have all the incentive in the world to lower that price or bundle it potentially with their offerings, which is reducing your TCO when it comes to the management.
So that's a great point, right? And you touched upon it. We touched on the AI part, right, on context of FinOps. But let's look at AI, ML in the context of organizations adopting it, right? I mean, it's a given that, I don't know when quantum computing will come in, which is again going to be a different space altogether, but AI, ML clearly is there, right? So one of the, researches that we've done, we've seen that about 79-80% of the companies have really started off on the AI journey already, right? Now, when I say AI journey, it could be also in the proof of concept stage, but most of them have either used it directly or as part of an integrated offering. Now, with that background, Vinod, maybe you can go first here again. How do you see FinOps evolving? Or do you see that companies have not had a FinOps tool, either external or pay too much attention to it? Do you think that will become more important or critical to the business going forward?
Certainly in terms of the raw numbers and the spend that one expects as these projects catch fire, I think it is certainly an area of concern. If we think there is scrutiny today, there will be 10x scrutiny tomorrow is what I think. But equally, I also think that, when you deal with something, see, one of the biggest premises in cloud was this variability concept. When you deal with loads that are fluctuating and when you are able to articulate to your management the true cost of AI, because I mean, if you read a magazine on a plane, you think this is a done deal, but the true cost of AI is still something that a lot of people can't put their finger on. For instance, most business executives I have spoken to don't believe that AI is expensive.
So that's a great point, right? So Rishu, again, I'll put this as two questions for you now, because we are saying that 10x scrutiny, right? I think that's a fantastic point. So we're saying that we need to scrutinize more. While, if you can emphasize the importance of FinOps going forward, can you also tell us if there are any best practices according to you going forward?
Sure. If you look at the best practices, I'll sort of break it down in varied areas. One, we've discussed, and sort of just summarizing all that we discussed. My view is that having a cross-functional collaborative team is important. It is important to have representations from IT teams, DevOps, business teams, product owners, finance. It is important to have representation from there, which also means that it's important to have shared responsibility in terms of the matrix, how we're tracking it, having a regular review in terms of usage or in terms of measuring it, so that if there are any deviations, that can be course corrected. Other than that, it's also important, like I said and discussed before, having an environment or having a cost-conscious awareness within the organization, which starts from the top and sort of cascaded down through the line of businesses in IT is another area that I think is very important. Aside of that, we discussed third-party tools. That is important. Having automation of optimized tasks, for instance, looking at instances that can be optimized. That's another area that I feel is really important. So some of these, I feel, sort of are important when organizations look at their FinOps strategy.
Chirag, same question for you. Any best practices that you think will govern FinOps as we go forward, especially with AI growth, etc.?
Yeah, the best practices, I guess we have already discussed almost all of them. Yeah, there has to be a cross-functional, there has to be awareness about FinOps more and more on the cost, and of course, it should be tagged and budgeted correctly, and there should be transparency in the organization on who's spending what, how much on cloud. If there's transparency, I guess you can definitely do wonders in optimizing and getting the best out of cloud that is there to offer.
So clearly we're talking about transparency, we're talking about clearly defined roles and accountabilities, ensuring that there are metrics in place. We know from your experience, right, what do you think would be another best practices to look at to make sure we've got FinOps in place and we're scrutinizing everything?
Absolutely, I think sunshine is always the best disinfectant is a quote I heard. That's exactly what it is. You put the costs out there. Your projects have to be able to stand for themselves. Business stakeholders need to understand what the cost of IT is, and I think we owe it to them to be transparent about these things. So that is really an absolutely solid point. So, the concepts under FinOps are not going away. They're only going to increase, they're only going to become more important. And while I might have very old-fashioned views about who should own them and how we should manage them, I think that doesn't change the basic idea that costs are meant to be discussed, meant to be understood, meant to be shared, and meant to be controlled and managed as you scale. So with that, I'd say that absolutely in alignment with what we said.
So I think we have time for just one more question. Otherwise, I'll go back to the panelists. Is there anybody who wants to ask a question from the audience? Okay, we have a gentleman there. Can we pass him the mic? Just one question. Yeah, he's got a question.
Yeah, my question is to Madam. You spoken about the core and the edge computing. Now the edge is like outpost near to the data. That also you said. So is that calls for a different type of security at the edge level and a different type of security at the core level?
This is more relevant to security than FinOps, but would anybody of you be comfortable taking that?
I think data needs to be secured wherever it is. So you obviously want to secure your data, particularly on the edge. The only difference is that the use cases for edge are generally much more transactional use cases, not strategic ones. For instance, I'll give you an example. I have a machine or let's say a diesel generator in one of my previous jobs. We had telecom sites with remote DGs. Edge is when you sense something is going on and you switch it off remotely. Now that's a very remote use case. The data you are collecting, the data you are acting on is a very transactional, transient data. 15 minutes later, the data often doesn't have currency. 15 minutes later, the data doesn't have relevance in a strategic sense. So you may want to protect it, but you may not want to protect it at the same level at which you protect, for instance, your core finance data in your GL at your data center. So it's what is appropriate for you in that situation that will dictate that. In general, my expectation would be, given the transient nature of edge data, that it would not require the same level of rigor, but I could be wrong in your particular use case.
Okay, so I think we're out of time, and I just wanted to thank the audience, of course, but thank you, Chirag, thank you, Rishu, and thank you very much, Vinod sir. Thank you for being on this.